My wife cheated on me in our home, in our bed. But she had no idea that I saw everything. I didn't yell or make a scene. I planned my revenge. A few weeks later, I won custody of our daughter, Emily, leaving Laura with nothing. Now she's begging me to take her back, promising to change. But is it worth forgiving betrayal? Can trust ever be rebuilt once it's been shattered? I won custody of my child from my cheating wife. Now she's begging to get her back, but I got my revenge. Adam sat silently in his office, staring at the copies of documents on the table. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Laura, his wife, seemed as she always did. Carefree, beautiful, successful. She always found a way to justify her absences, work hours, meetings with friends, and trips with business partners. But recently, he felt more certain than ever that something in their marriage had changed. He came home late from work. The idea of a shared dinner was no longer as lively as it once had been since Laura often forgot to prepare meals. Tonight, as usual, she was too busy. They both worked from home, and these same too busy days became more frequent, leading Adam to feel it was just a cover. He even began doubting her words. If before he overlooked the little things, now every step she took seemed suspicious to him. For example, her phone, always password protected, always in her hand, always under her control. She no longer left it on the table, and if he accidentally tried to glance at her notifications, she quickly turned her gaze away. All these little signs made Adam doubt her. His intuition began to tell him this wasn't just another phase in their marriage, but something more. Today, he decided not to put things off. He concealed his feelings and simply observed as Laura returned home late in the evening from another meeting. Her eyes looked strained, and her smile seemed overly artificial. If you're really so busy, why can't we ever spend time together? Adam thought, watching her reaction when she hugged him. Deep down, he felt his worries weren't unfounded. Laura, aren't you late today? He asked, trying to sound calm, but his voice undoubtedly betrayed his concern. He watched her face, hoping to notice even a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, any sign to confirm his suspicions. Adam, you're at it again. It's nothing serious. Everything's fine. I just stayed late at work. You know I have a lot going on, Laura replied, but her voice didn't sound as confident as usual. She tried to remain composed, but seemed to notice the shift in her husband's mood. It was unexpected. Adam didn't believe her words. Today, he decided to take action, and although their conversation seemed peaceful, he already knew he'd act the next day. For now, he tried to keep it together. He didn't plan to jump to conclusions without proof, but he needed answers. His thoughts were interrupted by her question. Are you doubting me again? Why can't you just trust me? Her eyes seemed lit with something more than just anger. It was a challenge. He smiled and replied, maybe I'm just tired of you always being on top of everything, but never being able to tell me where you were today? His words were calm but serious. Laura didn't answer immediately. Her gaze clouded, and Adam noticed how quickly she turned away, gathering her things. That moment became a turning point for him. Adam decided to set up a camera at the door overnight. By morning, she would leave for another meeting, or so he suspected. The next day, Laura left for another business meeting. She tried to deceive him again, but this time he was ready for her tricks. He tracked her every move. The door camera recorded her leaving, and Adam followed her in case his suspicions turned out to be true. But this day didn't go as he expected. As Adam followed Laura, peering into the window of a cafe, he saw her seated at a table with a man he had never seen before. It was undeniable, but it was also a moment of clarity. Laura, whose behavior had grown increasingly suspicious, sat beside this man, smiling and casually touching his hand. Adam couldn't believe his eyes. This wasn't just a business meeting. It was the moment when his suspicions seemed confirmed. He saw how Laura tried to mask her discomfort and loss of control. And this was only the beginning of what was to come. The next day, Adam couldn't stop thinking about Laura's behavior. Adam couldn't help but notice how Laura's behavior kept changing. It all started the moment she began leaving the house more often. At first, it was the usual get-togethers with friends, but over time these outings became more mysterious and strange. Adam couldn't pinpoint exactly what made him so wary, but something was off. Then one evening, as he sat at his computer working, Laura came home late, her expression tense. She avoided direct contact with him, constantly replying to messages she claimed were from an old friend. "I'm going to bed soon, but I have one more call," Laura said, throwing Adam a quick glance before immediately looking away. Adam just nodded, saying nothing. These calls had become so frequent that he couldn't ignore them. Laura tried not to draw his attention, but Adam wasn't that naive. He decided to observe for a while, without interfering. She often said it was just old friends, but why was their communication becoming so intense and secretive? The next day, Laura left again, leaving Adam with Emily. They spent a few hours together, and he realized that she was the only thing that truly mattered to him. Emily was the best thing that had ever happened in his life, and he did everything he could to give her a happy childhood, even if it meant living with a wife he no longer felt connected to. A few days later, when Laura returned home late at night again, Adam couldn't help but notice that her behavior was very strange. She tried to pretend everything was fine, but there was something off in her gaze. "Laura, were you with him again?" The question escaped Adam's lips before he could stop it. Laura quickly glanced at him and didn't even attempt to deny it. "It's just an old friend, Adam. You're overreacting," she said in a tone that sounded as if she was trying to convince not only him but also herself. Laura started to defend herself involuntarily, but Adam realized she was too stubborn to maintain her carefree facade. Adam didn't respond. He knew she didn't want to lose Emily, and while he no longer felt the warmth toward her that he once did, he harbored some residual sympathy. He decided to wait and not jump to conclusions. Adam sat at the table, carefully observing Laura as she started getting ready. She quickly threw on her coat, glancing at the clock, and he felt that something wasn't right. Laura didn't like to rush, but today, she was clearly not in her usual mood. Anxiety flickered in her eyes, and although she tried to hide it, Adam noticed everything. He didn't know why, but as time went on, he became more convinced that her behavior was changing. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked, his voice soft but with a hint of suspicion. "Oh, just meeting a friend." "It won't take long," she replied, quickly putting on her shoes. Her words seemed ordinary, but Adam noticed how she glanced at her phone again and quickly slipped it into her bag. That was the last straw. He had noticed her unnatural behavior before, but today it was particularly obvious. "Laura, you didn't say who exactly you're meeting with," Adam couldn't help but ask. She sighed nervously and tried to smile, but the smile was fake, insincere. "Just an old friend, you know? We haven't seen each other in ages." "Don't worry, everything's fine," she said as she stood up. Adam nodded, but inside, his suspicion grew. Everything seemed too complicated, too convoluted. Laura had never been this distant before. Usually, she shared her plans, but now she kept everything a secret. Adam decided that tonight he wouldn't wait to find out more. He would do things his way. As soon as Laura left the house, Adam grabbed his phone and called the very number she had been hiding recently, but no one answered. It was difficult. He knew he was breaching her trust, but it was necessary. When he heard the voice on the other end, he immediately understood that something was wrong. From that moment on, the game began. A game he decided to play on his own terms. He collected every detail, step by step. Laura didn't know he was already watching, but she continued to convince him that it was all just old friends. Adam didn't believe her words, but he wasn't yet ready to fully uncover the truth. He was simply waiting. After a few days, when Laura went out for another evening meeting, Adam couldn't help but notice changes in her behavior. Her outings were becoming more regular, and on her phone, he noticed messages that clearly came from the same man. If she was so open with him, why did she keep hiding this? Adam felt that the truth would soon come to light, and it was no longer a question of if it happened, but when. Every evening when Laura returned, she tried to appear calm and carefree, but Adam already knew something was going on behind his back. He couldn't say he knew exactly what she was doing, but his intuition told him that this time, he wouldn't just sit back and watch. "Are you going out again?" he asked that evening when he saw Laura putting on her coat. He looked at her with the feeling that he could no longer just stand idly by. "Yes, I have a meeting." Laura leaned toward the mirror, trying to avoid his gaze. Adam realized it wasn't the time for emotions. He decided not to ask any more questions. Instead, he watched her every move, noticing how she tried to act naturally, even though he could see she lacked confidence. The night was tense. Adam woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Laura had returned home late, and he heard her quietly stepping over the threshold, trying not to make any noise. She didn't want to wake him, which only confirmed his suspicions. He decided he would deal with all of this. The next morning, he observed her, trying to remain unnoticed, but increasingly felt that Laura was trying to manipulate him. She was no longer as open as she used to be. All these unclear meetings, hidden calls, late returns, it was all beginning to come together. But he wasn't ready to say it aloud yet. He understood that if the burden of making a definitive decision fell on him, it would only make the situation worse. For now, his goal was to wait. Laura continued to play her role. She often emphasized how important it was for her to maintain relationships with her old friends, but these explanations didn't sound convincing. With each of her actions, Adam became more convinced that their relationship wasn't as simple as she tried to make it seem. If only she knew that he had already found something important. Laura increasingly felt the tension in her relationship with Adam. She seemed to be trying to be a good mother to Emily, but every time she came home, she buried herself in work or activities that required her time away from the house. Adam began to notice that she wasn't spending as much time with their daughter, and sometimes Emily looked sad and upset when her mom once again couldn't step away from work. It seemed less and less important to her what was happening at home. Adam tried to talk to her about it. Laura, Adam began one evening when she returned home, Emily has been feeling sad more often. Why are you spending so little time with her? She's starting to miss you more and more. Laura looked at him, her eyes not leaving the screen of her phone. Sorry, I'm just busy with work. You know how much I have to get done. It's temporary. Adam wanted to say something in response, but realized this had become her standard answer. She always had so much going on. It seemed more and more like she only cared about work and business, leaving everything else for later. However, Adam felt that something wasn't right. What had changed in their relationship? Why was Laura refusing to spend time with their daughter and him? Increasingly, he began to wonder if something was happening that he wasn't aware of. One evening, he followed her when she left the house late at night. She carried a small black briefcase, and Adam noticed how quickly she disappeared into the darkness. That night, Laura returned home late. Adam was sitting on the couch, watching her as she walked in. She smelled of cigarettes and an unfamiliar men's cologne. It was unlike her usual scent. You smell strange, like cigarettes and men's cologne, Adam said, his eyes fixed on her face. Who were you with? Laura stopped and looked at him. There was a hint of worry in her eyes. It's not what you think. I was meeting with a business partner. We were just discussing some work-related issues. You don't want me to give everything up because of you, do you? She replied, throwing her bag onto a chair. Adam, though lacking proof, felt suspicious. He knew Laura was never this open, especially when it came to personal matters. Just stop being jealous, Adam. Everything's fine, Laura added, visibly nervous. With each passing day, Adam felt more distance growing between them. Laura not only became more detached but also increasingly handled her matters outside the home. Every time Adam tried to talk to her, she found a reason to avoid the conversation. There was so much Adam couldn't understand. He wasn't the kind of man to keep a close eye on her every move, but what had happened to their relationship didn't let him rest. He was athletic, in great physical shape, and regularly worked on self-improvement. His parents supported him financially, and he had rejected traditional jobs for others. He disliked working for companies, feeling freer when focused on personal growth. But Laura had changed. He could feel it. She was a strong woman who had achieved a lot in business. She earned well, and he respected that. Yet, it increasingly seemed like her interests were solely in her career. The time they once spent together was dwindling. Still, he had no evidence of infidelity, so he continued caring for their child, Emily. He didn't know what to think, but his heart told him things weren't as they should be. After the last incident, Laura did start spending more time with Emily. She didn't want Emily to feel her mother was becoming distant. She truly loved her daughter, but Adam was no longer so sure their family was the same as it used to be. They had been living not out of habit, but out of necessity for a long time. And as more time passed, Laura seemed to drift further away from him. All these changes gave Adam the feeling that he was losing something. He felt that this wasn't just work stress or new problems. It was something more. Adam became increasingly convinced that Laura wasn't simply busy with work. He tried, but he couldn't figure out what was really going on. Laura began worrying more about her relationship with Adam, but her guilt made her act unnaturally. She tried to restore things, but the manipulations she began using became more and more apparent to Adam. He sensed that something was wrong, and his suspicions only grew stronger. One evening, Laura came home late, and Adam immediately noticed something unusual. She didn't smell like her usual perfume and seemed a bit nervous. But what struck him most were the marks on her neck, small red spots that looked like kisses. Adam raised his eyebrows when he saw them, and his heart began to race. Laura went to bed, but Adam couldn't sleep peacefully. He carefully looked at her calm face, and all he could think about were those marks. So, when Laura fell asleep, Adam gently touched her neck. His suspicions were confirmed. They were indeed marks left by a man. Something clicked in his mind, and he decided he couldn't sit idly by without knowing the truth anymore. His jealousy toward Laura turned into something deeper. He couldn't and didn't want to lose his family, but he understood that the situation was becoming far too complicated. The next day, Adam decided to follow Laura. That morning, Laura skillfully covered the kiss marks on her neck with concealer, doing it so expertly that they were hardly noticeable. He could no longer trust her as he once did. Laura, unaware of Adam's plans, was busy preparing for their daughter's birthday. It was supposed to be an important event, and she was planning to invite her friends. They discussed it together. "Emily is turning 5 already," Laura said as she woke up in the morning. "I was thinking we could invite our friends tomorrow. And also my business partner," she added, glancing quickly at Adam. Adam, listening to her, couldn't hide his surprise. "Your business partner?" he asked. "You know how I feel about him. You shouldn't invite someone who could make me doubt you." Laura smiled, but her smile looked a bit tense. "You don't understand, Adam. It's just business. You'll see there's nothing between us. I love you. Just stop interfering all the time," she replied. Adam felt his heart tighten at her response. He didn't like the situation, but he decided to agree. He didn't want to argue about it, especially because of Emily. His goal wasn't to create conflict, but to uncover the truth. "Fine," he said, trying to stay calm. "But this is the last time I'm agreeing to this." Laura just nodded, and they continued discussing the plans for the party. But Adam increasingly felt a desire to uncover all her secrets. The evening of the next day was filled with a festive atmosphere. Laura's friends and her business partner arrived at the party, and Adam noticed how she behaved around him. They discussed work, laughed, and Laura looked more relaxed than ever. The business partner, Henry, was very charismatic, and Adam couldn't help but notice how much attention Laura paid to him. Adam observed them from a distance, trying to remain unnoticed. She laughed at his jokes, and he responded to her smiles and compliments. Occasionally, Adam tried to focus on other things to avoid seeming too suspicious. But every time Laura gazed into her business partner's eyes, Adam felt his nerves tighten. "It's nice that we're all together," said Henry, the business partner. "You look wonderful, and your little girl is absolutely delightful." Adam stood in the corner, trying not to attract attention, but his gaze kept drifting back to Henry and Laura. She laughed at his jokes, trying to stay polite and composed, but Adam saw how her eyes lingered on him. Henry acted confidently and casually, and Adam couldn't help but notice how comfortable he seemed around Laura. Maybe it was just friendly interaction, but Adam felt something wasn't right. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but his intuition told him there was more to their relationship than just work. Kevin, noticing Adam standing off to the side, nodded at him. "You okay?" he asked, walking over to him. "Yeah, I'm fine," Adam replied, trying to appear calm. But Kevin could tell Adam was uneasy. He lowered his voice and said, "Listen, I don't want to get involved, but did you notice how Laura and Henry act around each other? I don't want to be too forward, but it looks like there's more between them than just a business partnership." Adam closed his eyes for a few seconds, trying to calm himself. "I know, Kev, but I don't have any proof." All these signs are just my suspicions. Kevin didn't drop the subject. Still, don't you feel like something is off here? You said you saw those marks on her neck. Maybe you should talk to her instead of keeping it all bottled up. Adam sighed heavily. I don't want to accuse her without evidence. My priority is our family. I don't want to lose Laura or Emily. They're too important to me. But if she really is cheating on me, I'll have no choice but to act. I just don't know what to do. Kevin nodded understandingly. I get it. But don't forget about yourself, Adam. If there's anything that feels wrong, it's better to find out sooner rather than later. Adam didn't respond, simply turning back toward the house. He remained quiet, despite everything happening around him. The festive atmosphere filled the room. Little Emily laughed and ran around, playing with her friends and the guests, but Adam's heart felt heavy. He glanced at Laura and Henry, who stood by the table talking about work, and noticed how Henry accidentally touched her hand when she showed him something. It was a casual touch, but to Adam, it felt like so much more. Why aren't you laughing? Laura asked when she noticed him watching her. Adam pressed his lips together. Nothing, just observing. Laura smiled, but Adam saw how her gaze shifted when she looked at Henry. He couldn't explain it, but he felt something was wrong. Kevin approached Adam again, and the two of them moved to another part of the room. Kevin leaned closer, his tone more serious this time. I know you don't want to think about this, but if it's not cheating, then why is she acting this way? And why does it all seem like you're just ignoring the obvious? Adam couldn't respond. He didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to think that his wife, the mother of his child, could be unfaithful. Yet this had become his reality. All he could do was watch their interactions, trying to understand what was happening without jumping to conclusions. Meanwhile, the party continued, and Adam tried to distract himself from the thoughts that wouldn't leave him alone. He went over to his daughter, who was running around and having fun with her friends. Emily looked up when she saw him and ran over, hugging his legs. Daddy, are you having fun? She asked. I'm always happy when I'm with you, Adam said, smiling as he hugged Emily and held her close. But deep in his heart, the worry remained. He didn't know how much longer he could endure this situation. At that moment, he decided he needed to find out more about what was truly happening. He couldn't leave things as they were. And although Laura hadn't given him any concrete evidence, he began planning his next steps. As the celebration drew to a close, the guests began to leave. Laura and Henry were among the last, still chatting against the backdrop of fading party sounds. After the party, Adam decided it was time to talk to Henry. With each passing day, his suspicions grew stronger, and he could no longer ignore what was happening between him and Laura. Adam resolved to confront the situation before it was too late. He approached Henry as the guests were leaving. Henry was standing near the door, adjusting his jacket, when Adam spoke to him. You're not planning to take my wife Laura and my daughter Emily away from me, are you? Adam asked, looking at Henry and trying to keep his voice calm. Henry looked surprised, furrowing his brow. No, why would I? Are you jealous of Laura and me? Adam didn't answer immediately. His heart raced, but he tried to remain composed. Yes, I'm jealous because I see how you look at each other. You must have noticed it yourself, Henry, and I see how she behaves. It all seems very strange. Henry started to laugh, but it was more of an uneasy chuckle. No, Adam, I would never get involved with a woman who has a husband and child. Never. Adam studied him, trying to determine if he was telling the truth. He didn't know if he could trust Henry, but something about his demeanor, his tone, and his expression made Adam feel that he was being honest. This man truly didn't seem to have any romantic intentions toward Laura. Still, the sense of unease lingered. Adam felt that Laura and Henry were hiding something. Laura stepped out of the room and saw them talking. She smiled and said, Hey, guys, how are you? Did you enjoy yourselves? Adam felt the weight on his chest lighten slightly, but his suspicions didn't fade. He nodded at Laura and told Henry, Excuse me, I need to go read Emily a bedtime story. Henry nodded and quietly headed for the door, leaving Adam alone with his thoughts. Laura approached Adam and kissed him on the cheek. You didn't forget that we have important plans tomorrow, did you? She asked as she leaned closer to him. Adam, without responding, simply nodded. Yes, I know. But right now, I'm going to see Emily. Laura smiled and said, "All right, I'll see Henry out." She walked off to follow him. Adam went upstairs to Emily's room. His daughter was getting ready for bed, and when she saw him, her face lit up. "Daddy, you're here. Will you read me a story?" she asked, sitting on the bed. Adam smiled, sat beside her, and began reading a story. But his mind was preoccupied with other thoughts. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with Laura. She kept changing her behavior, and there seemed to be more between her and Henry than just business. Why is she so distant? Adam thought. Maybe it's just my imagination, but I can't help feeling that something is off. What is she really hiding? Emily quickly fell asleep, and Adam left her room, once again alone with his thoughts. He sat on the couch, his mind drifting back to Laura and her strange behavior. Perhaps she was involved with someone else, not Henry. He couldn't entirely rule out the possibility of her cheating, even though he had no evidence. Why has she changed? Adam kept asking himself as he analyzed every detail. She wasn't the same as she used to be. But if she really was cheating, with whom? And why hadn't he noticed it earlier? The next morning, Adam found that Laura had left the house earlier than usual, leaving him alone. He decided it was time to talk to her and try to uncover the truth. The doubts were eating away at him. He called Laura, but she didn't answer. This only heightened his suspicions. He decided he could no longer remain in the dark. When Laura returned home, she decided to be honest with Adam, even if her words felt like a challenge. She began explaining that there seemed to be some distance growing between them. She didn't have specific reasons for it, but for some reason, everything felt more mundane and less emotional. Laura admitted that she no longer felt the same attraction that had once been between them, and she was increasingly troubled by her own need for variety and romance. But Adam couldn't understand what kind of distance could have developed between them when he had been trying so hard to hold everything together. "I just want you to know," Laura said, avoiding his gaze. "I don't feel the same way I used to. Maybe I need time or space. This isn't your problem. It's my internal struggle." Adam felt a heavy weight in his chest as he listened. He had never imagined having such a conversation. Everything in his life seemed stable. He still loved Laura, and although some aspects of their relationship had begun to change, he had hoped they could fix things. "What does this mean, Laura?" Adam asked, trying to understand where she was going with this. "Do you want to be free? Do you want me to let you have a relationship with someone else?" "Not exactly," Laura said, pausing as if searching for the right words. "I just feel like sometimes we forget about ourselves as a couple. Maybe I'm missing a bit of lightness, some variety in life. I'm not saying I want to cheat on you or anything like that. I just think we both need a pause to figure out what we really want." Adam heard her words, but couldn't shake his suspicions. All these years, their marriage had been stable, but something had changed. He couldn't quite explain it, but he felt that Laura wasn't the same person she used to be. "I don't know how this can work," Adam said, looking at her with a gaze full of questions. "It all feels like some sort of conspiracy, though I don't even know with whom." "With whom?" Laura looked at him, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "Adam, are you trying to say I'm cheating on you?" "I don't know. You tell me, with Henry?" Adam blurted out, his words hitting like a sharp blade. Laura, hearing the name, looked startled but quickly regained her composure. "I'm not cheating on you with anyone," Laura said, visibly offended. "You can't just decide that I'm having an affair with Henry or anyone else. I just want you to understand my feelings." Adam found it hard to accept her words. The uncertainty and shadow of suspicion loomed between them. He wasn't ready for such a shift in their relationship. "Maybe we can find a solution," he said after a pause. "Maybe we can try to fix whatever is wrong between us. But I'm not ready to put our family at risk." Laura nodded, but her expression was no longer as open as it used to be. She felt that there was still a barrier between them. She wanted to change something, but perhaps she herself didn't fully understand how or why things had gotten to this point. "Understood," she replied, trying to keep her composure. "But right now, I have a lot of work. I'll try to figure this out myself." Adam stood there, watching as she returned to her work. His thoughts weighed heavily on him like a stone. Was she being honest? What was really behind her words? He couldn't shake the feeling that Laura was hiding something from him. That night, Adam couldn't fall asleep for a long time. He could hear Laura quietly talking on the phone, but he couldn't make out the words. It only fueled his suspicions further. He didn't want to believe that his wife could be cheating, but why did everything seem so strange? The next day, he noticed Laura's behavior had changed again. She wasn't acting like her usual self. It seemed like she was trying to keep her distance, even in the way she spoke and carried herself. This only made Adam more uneasy. "Are you leaving again?" he asked, watching her pack her things. "Yes, I have a lot of work," Laura replied without turning to him. "You know I can't just sit at home." Adam silently watched her. He didn't have any evidence, but he felt that this wasn't just about work. It was something more. "All right," he said, watching her walk out the door. "But we'll talk later." "All right. Have a good day," Laura replied. That morning, Adam took Emily to her grandmother's house. He decided to use the day to investigate Laura. She looked different than usual today. In the morning, when she left the house, she was wearing an outfit he had never seen before. It was bold, flashy, and provocative, completely unlike her usual style. She looked much more vibrant and daring, even provocative. Adam couldn't understand what had caused her to dress this way. When he asked about her plans, Laura shrugged and said she had an important meeting to attend. She quickly added that it was a business meeting and assured him that everything was fine. But her appearance, her rush, it all raised red flags for Adam. He wasn't usually the jealous type, but something about her behavior didn't add up. After dropping off their daughter, Adam decided to dig deeper. He drove to Laura's office, but when he arrived, she wasn't there. Her colleagues informed him that she had gone to meet a client and even mentioned the restaurant where she was supposed to be. Adam got in his car and headed to the address. But when he arrived, he was met with a surprise. The location wasn't a typical restaurant. It was a club with a basement entrance, loud music, and the smell of hookah in the air. Adam was taken aback, but decided to go in. The club was packed with people, most of whom looked far from ordinary. Women in revealing outfits, extravagant food and drinks. The whole atmosphere was dark and mysterious. He couldn't understand how this could be a place for a business meeting. He cautiously scanned the room, searching for Laura. She had to be here, but where? Suddenly, in the crowd, Adam spotted her. Laura was sitting in the VIP section with her back to him, but she wasn't alone. There was a man in a black blazer with her, his arm around her waist. Adam's curiosity spiked. This wasn't Henry, her colleague. Who could this be? What were they doing together? Why was he so close to her? Adam didn't want to cause a scene in a place like that, so he decided to be cautious. He quickly took out his phone and snapped a few photos. Laura didn't even notice he was there. He understood he needed to learn more, but now wasn't the right time. Adam drove home, deciding not to confront Laura about what he had seen just yet. He wanted to observe her behavior for a few more days to see if this was just a coincidence. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was becoming increasingly clear that something was off. Later that evening, Laura called him. "Hi, Adam," she said. "I'm staying over at a friend's tonight. I'll be a little late." Adam, not wanting to reveal his suspicions, replied, "Thanks for letting me know." He hung up the phone and sat in thought. What was she doing at that club? Why didn't she mention staying at a friend's house earlier? And why had she left home in such a rush without explaining the details? Adam decided not to draw conclusions yet, but the images of what he had seen kept replaying in his mind. Everything about it seemed suspicious. Over the next few days, Laura continued coming up with various reasons to stay out late. She became increasingly withdrawn in their conversations, and Adam noticed her growing more distant. She no longer talked about her work or discussed her plans with him as she used to. It was strange, especially since he already had his doubts. Adam decided to check her phone again, sensing that she was hiding something. He often had access to her phone, and this time, he was determined to find a clue. But what he discovered only deepened his suspicions. Her messages included many unexplained deleted chats, and even some phone numbers were hidden. Adam didn't know what it all meant, but he felt a growing sense of disappointment. A few days later, Laura stayed out late for work again, and Adam decided to go to her office to see what she was up to. When he arrived, Laura wasn't there. Her colleagues told him she had gone to meet a client, even mentioning the name of the restaurant where she was supposed to be. Adam got in his car and drove to the address. But when he arrived, he was met with a surprise. The location wasn't a restaurant. It was a club with a basement entrance. Loud music boomed from inside, and the air was filled with the scent of hookah. Adam was taken aback, but decided to go in. The club was packed with people, most of whom were far from ordinary. Women wore revealing outfits, drinks and dishes were extravagant, and the atmosphere was dark and mysterious. He couldn't understand how this could be a place for a business meeting. He cautiously scanned the room, looking for Laura. She had to be here. But where? Suddenly, in the crowd, Adam spotted her. Laura was sitting in the VIP section with her back to him, and she wasn't alone. A man in a black blazer was with her, his arm around her waist. Adam's curiosity spiked. This wasn't Henry, her colleague. Who was this man? What were they doing together? Why was he so close to her? Adam decided to head back home. He picked up Emily from her grandmother's house and began to realize there were too many hints pointing to Laura's infidelity. He didn't know what to do next, but his greatest concern was for Emily. What would happen to her if their relationship fell apart? Adam sat in the kitchen, holding Laura's phone in his hands. He still couldn't believe what he had seen the day before. The photos of her with the man at the club, who had his arm around her, looked far from innocent. What he found in her messages only reinforced his suspicions. She was clearly hiding something from him. While Laura slept peacefully in the next room, Adam couldn't calm down. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't resist checking her phone again. When he opened it, he saw new messages from the same man. He was Laura's business partner, but that seemed highly unlikely. Their messages were warm, full of jokes, compliments, and hints at a personal relationship. "What are you doing, Laura?" Adam thought as he scrolled through the photos. They were together in many of them, laughing, dining in restaurants, hugging. This didn't look like business meetings at all. Adam glanced at the clock and realized he couldn't just sit there doing nothing. Gathering his strength, he decided to act. The next day, he told Laura that he and Emily would spend the night at her grandmother's house. She didn't object. In fact, she seemed a bit flustered that Adam had suddenly decided to leave her home alone. "All right, Adam, have a good time there. Emily will be happy," she said. Adam dropped his daughter off at her grandmother's house, but decided to return home to see what would happen. He didn't tell Laura what he planned to do. He didn't trust her and felt something was bound to happen that night. He parked his car a short distance from their house, watching and waiting. A few minutes later, a black car appeared on their street, the same car Adam had seen at the club. He pressed himself back into the seat, watching intently. The man he had seen with Laura at the club stepped out of the car and walked toward their house. What is he doing here? Adam thought, nervously watching through the window. He couldn't believe his eyes. He decided to leave the car and approach the house quietly. After walking a few houses down, he reached their home, staying hidden. The man entered the house, and Adam stayed outside, waiting. He sat in the dark, trying to figure out what to do next. After half an hour, he realized he couldn't just sit still. "I have to find out what's going on," he thought. Taking a deep breath, he approached the house and quietly slipped around to the back door. Adam entered the house through the back, avoiding attention. He crept up the stairs and listened carefully outside the bedroom. The sounds coming from the room were muffled, but he could clearly hear Laura laughing and a man's low voice. Something was definitely wrong, and his heart pounded in his chest. Adam couldn't take it anymore. He quietly opened the bedroom door, and the scene he saw shook him to his core. Laura and the man were lying on the bed. They were so close to each other that there was no doubt this was an affair. Laura, his wife, was cheating on him with the same man he had seen at the club. Everything Adam had seen before now made sense. Her strange trips, changes in behavior, and all those little things he didn't like. All of it now had an explanation. Adam felt his soul being crushed by pain. He didn't know what to do. He didn't want to lose her, but now he understood that this wasn't the Laura he had loved. He quietly left the room without making a sound. He waited another minute to ensure nothing had changed and quickly exited the house. Back in his car, Adam closed his eyes, feeling the world spinning around him. He knew this moment would haunt him forever. Now he had to decide what to do next. But his biggest concern was for his daughter, Emily. What would happen to her? What would happen to their family? What Adam had witnessed changed his life forever. Now he knew for sure that infidelity wasn't just emotional pain. It was a breach of trust that couldn't be repaired. Adam realized he would never be the same man he was before. The next day, he went to see Laura, but without Emily. Adam sat in the living room, watching Laura as she made coffee in the kitchen. She seemed as she always did, but nothing was the same. His thoughts revolved around one question: what to do now, after what he had seen? Yesterday's encounter with the man in their home, who had left without hesitation, made Adam feel that everything he had built with Laura was crumbling. He decided to talk to Laura. He needed to understand what had happened, why it had happened, and whether there was any chance for their relationship to survive. "Laura, can we talk?" Adam said as she brought over the coffee and sat down next to him. "Of course. What's going on?" she asked, sensing the change in his tone. "I need to understand what's happening between us. I saw that man in our house. You didn't tell me he was coming over. What does this mean?" Adam asked, looking directly at her. Laura shook her head slightly, as if trying to process what she had just heard. It was just a business meeting. Nothing special," she replied, but her gaze avoided his. Adam didn't believe her. He had seen more than just a business meeting. He knew there was something going on between them. He asked again, calmer but with evident tension, "Why didn't you tell me about it? What else are you hiding from me, Laura?" Laura took a deep breath and paused for a moment. Then she looked at him and said again, "It's not what you think. He's just a partner. There's nothing personal." Adam felt his heart tighten. He knew this wasn't the simple truth. His suspicions grew stronger, but he tried to stay calm. "I've seen your messages. I've seen how you talk about personal things. It didn't look like just business. And I've seen you cheat on me with that man, in our bed. You won't fool me anymore." His voice was quiet but firm. Laura stood up and walked to the window, unsure of what to say. Adam watched her. He wanted to hear the truth, but he was terrified of knowing it. What if there was no justification for any of this? I just didn't want to disappoint you, Adam. I started feeling that things were changing, that there was something between us I couldn't explain," Laura said, her voice weak and full of sadness. Adam felt lost. He didn't know how to respond. He still loved Laura, but she was pulling away from him, and he couldn't ignore how their dynamic had changed. Laura turned to him and, with a deep sigh, confessed, "Yes, I cheated on you. And I'm so sorry, Adam. I don't know how it happened. It wasn't right." Adam stayed silent, and his silence was more painful than any words. He felt a pain that couldn't be described. He still loved Laura but couldn't forgive her for what she had done. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why didn't you ask for forgiveness?" he asked, looking at her with deep bitterness in his eyes. "I was afraid you would leave me," she replied, her voice quiet and broken. Adam sighed and tried to process everything that had happened. He tried to figure out if there was any chance for their relationship, but something inside him screamed that it was already over. What they had was lost. "You know, I always thought we could overcome anything. But now I'm not so sure," he said. Laura stepped closer, but Adam moved back. She reached out her hand to him, but he didn't take it. He wasn't ready for that. "Maybe we can try again. Maybe we can start over," Laura said, trying to stay calm. She didn't want to lose him, but he was no longer the man he used to be. Adam took a deep breath and stood there for a few seconds. His mind was overwhelmed. He loved her, but he felt the trust between them was gone. How could you rebuild a relationship when you could no longer trust the person you loved? "I don't know, Laura. I can't just undo everything." His voice was cold, and he could feel it himself. He knew this was the last conversation they would have for a long time. "Do you want a divorce?" Laura asked, her voice quiet, her eyes filled with tears. Adam was silent for a moment, then replied, "I don't know what's next, but I can't leave this unanswered." And even though Laura tried to convince him they could fix things, Adam felt the betrayal was too deep to repair. In the end, he made a decision that set them on separate paths. A few weeks later, they filed for divorce. Adam didn't want to leave Laura, but he couldn't forget what had happened. His heart was broken, and he could no longer live in a lie. He realized that sometimes even love isn't enough to overcome betrayal. Sometime later, Adam sat in his apartment, holding the documents confirming his victory in court. He had won custody of Emily, and it was the most important decision of his life. Now he felt a sense of peace, even though the pain of betrayal hadn't yet faded. He couldn't forget what Laura had done. He remembered seeing her with that man while he was at work, how she had hidden the details of their meetings from him, and how he had lost trust in her because of it. But most of all, he couldn't forgive her for putting her own desires above their family. Laura couldn't believe how things had turned out. She called him repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Now, left without her husband and child, she tried to find any way to get him back. Adam, please don't do this. I know I made a mistake. You don't want our daughter to grow up without a mother, Laura said when she came to his apartment. Adam stood in front of her, looking at her without any emotion. He couldn't believe she was still trying to justify her choices. You want me to take you back? You cheated on me, Laura. You put your desires above our family. How can I trust you again? He replied calmly, but each word was filled with disappointment. Laura took a step forward, trying to get closer. I was foolish. I see that now. Please, give me a chance. I'm willing to change. Adam shook his head and sighed deeply. We've already been down this road. I can't forgive you. You've lost your family, Laura. I won't let you ruin our daughter's life. Laura started crying, but Adam didn't change his decision. He knew it was the best thing for him and Emily. He was no longer willing to be with someone who betrayed his trust. I don't want anything more from you. Emily stays with me, Adam said firmly. Laura left the apartment, but her gaze was filled with pain and despair. She had lost everything, and she knew she could never regain what she had destroyed. Adam sat at the table, looking at a photo of his daughter. He knew her happiness meant more to him than anything else. All the memories of Laura now felt distant, and he felt a sense of calm. He had won, but the price of that victory had been steep. Was Adam right to take his child away from Laura?